As the screen says, tonight we're going to be talking about using DNA results to find family in the old country. And this is our agenda for tonight. We'll be going through these different steps, starting out with a DNA review. So this program is really trying to gear more towards someone who has some experience with DNA. So we're not going to spend a lot of time going over the types of DNA testing. Now, I should mention that this is in your handout. I put more of an explanation of things in your handout. So check the handout if you get lost. I tend to try to do longer handouts that give more explanation about what I'm talking about on the actual webinar. So our 4 types of DNA testing that you can do for genealogy are autosomal, Y-DNA, mitochondrial DNA, and X-DNA. The autosomal is the one that probably most of you have taken. It can be taken by anybody, male or female, and it provides you with DNA matches to both your mother and your father's side. And you will get matches that descend from about the same 5th great grandparents as you, give or take a generation or two on either side of that. And most people do start with this test, and it is the best one for adoptees to start with. The Y chromosome test is a male-only test. It's inherited from that male's father, and it would be a test of the direct paternal line of that man. Again, most males would want to start with an autosomal test and then go from there, but Y chromosome can be useful in a number of situations. Mitochondrial DNA, which is abbreviated mtDNA, males and females can take this test. It's only females will pass it to their offspring, and it is inherited from the mother of that male or female, and it would be the test of the direct maternal line. Generally, when you have a female line question, you should start with an autosomal test. And X-DNA is included in the autosomal test. There's a special inheritance pattern to X that can sometimes provide good clues on a DNA or on a genealogical problem, but we're not going to cover X-DNA tonight. The testing companies, so the autosomal DNA testing companies, there's 4 major testing companies: Ancestry DNA, Family Tree DNAs, Family Finder Test, MyHeritage DNA, and 23andMe. For the Y chromosome and the mitochondrial DNA, you would have to test at Family Tree DNA to get matches and to really work with those matches to come to some genealogical conclusions. Okay, now this is kind of a speculative slide, but what are the chances of your matches leading you to the old country? Well, if you're using autosomal DNA, I would say in general, if you have a relatively recent immigrant to a new country. So if you're here in America, you're in Canada, you're in Australia, if your family immigrated to that place relatively recently, let's say the last 200 years, you might expect to find some DNA matches that could lead you to the old country. With the Y chromosome and the mitochondrial DNA, it's a little more variable. If you find a match to someone who is in the old country, of course, then you have a link to somebody then in the old country. Or if you find a match to somebody who has tracked their family to the old country. So it's a matter of looking to see who your matches are on the Y chromosome and the mitochondrial and working together with those people. After you find family in the old country, I would suggest that you contact them, that you share information, photographs, documents, and stories, and you might even meet with them or visit with them. Some people that I know have done that. One fellow here in Fort Wayne has met a family member from New Zealand who through DNA testing, and he's been to New Zealand several times to visit this man. They become very good friends. So again, your connections with your DNA matches can sometimes be really life-changing. And you can also use those connections with the matches to look at their family tree, look at their genealogical data to move further back in time on that particular family line. So working together with the match and using their tree to kind of get back further on your line. So we're mostly going to be talking about autosomal DNA tonight, and you need to know, in order to work well with your autosomal matches, you need to have them sorted out. So I go into quite a bit of detail about this in your handout. So we're just going to kind of skate over it on these slides. But basically, when you get your autosomal DNA matches back, you start out with a long list of names of matches. And they are arranged from your closest matches, perhaps your closest family, to people all the way down to like 5th to 8th cousins. These would be the most distant relatives that you have on your match list. And so you might say to yourself, who are these people? Why are they on my DNA match list? And how do they connect to me? One way that you can start to figure out who some of the mystery matches might be is to identify your known family matches. So unless you're adopted or something like that, you should have known family matches on your DNA match list. A cousin, an aunt or uncle, a second cousin, somebody like that you recognize their name, their profile, their picture, and you say, oh, yeah, that's cousin Bob, and he's on my maternal side. And more specifically, how is he related? So when you identify known family matches, this helps you also work with the unknown matches. So if you haven't done this already, you want to start to try identifying close family matches, starting with the highest level matches that you have and going down to maybe third cousin level matches of 90 centimorgans of shared DNA with you or more. And of course, a lot of us are going to go way farther down than that, but that's just kind of a starting place for you if you haven't done this before. So this is a look at a match page with Ancestry DNA. And usually on the match page, you will have a username next to the picture over there. And I have taken those out because I can't show the names of my matches on these slides because I don't have their permission, and that would be a breach of privacy. So normally you'll get the name of your match, but it could be a nickname, it could be a pseudonym, it could be just their initials. So sometimes you can't see the real name of your matches. So, but if you can, then you can identify some of these people right away and say, oh yeah, there's cousin Susie, there's cousin Bob. But looking at the name of the match will help you. Viewing the trees, you can see that several of these matches have trees. When it says public linked tree, unlinked tree, those are all, this is the column in the middle here. View those trees, look for common names, common surnames in your family, common places that you recognize. Use the common ancestor hints. So on this second cousin match here in the middle of the page, you can see it says common ancestor hint. And MyHeritage also shows you this on your match page, that if you have a relative in common from the trees. You can always message your matches. And so if you see a really intriguing match, you can send them a message and ask them, more about themselves. And then you can also use the shared matches to approximate the relationship to a particular side of the family. So this second cousin here, let's say this is somebody that I know. If I look and I know how I'm related to this person, and if I look at the shared matches between me and the second cousin, I will know that they are also on my maternal side because we're shared matches. Okay, this is also on your handout in a great deal of detail. So you can use many different methods of sorting and evaluating your autosomal DNA matches. You can use a process of elimination. You can use labels to the most recent common ancestor couple. You can use the leads method. This is best for adoptees to start with who don't know who their family might be at all. And that is detailed over at Dana Leeds' website, and it's in your handout. It's also right here on the screen, danaleeds.com. You can search the names and the trees of your matches for common surnames or places, and you can use known cousins to look at shared matches. You can use any of those matches or any of those sorting methods, or even a different sorting method that I have suggested that are helpful to you. You can mix and match, and more than one method may be needed or useful depending on your particular situation. So with that, we're going to go into our short case studies of how to use DNA to perhaps find family in the old country or find clues to family in the old country. And we will be mentioning people's names in these case studies, but the living people, I will be using a pseudonym for them. I will not be using their real name. So this is to protect their privacy. Okay, so our first case study is somebody who's looking for some Irish family. And we're going to use autosomal DNA and a number of different techniques to try to drill down on finding more about these Skians. Okay, so this is our problem person. This is the immigrant. Oh, actually, this is not the immigrant. This is the furthest back that this person has been able to trace their line. So they've gotten themselves back to a Jeremiah Skian who was born in 1833 in County Clare in Ireland. He was married twice, once to Bridget, second to Honoria, and this was both taking place in the parish of Broadford in County Clare. He died in County Clare in 1900. On his second marriage to Honoria, his father's name was listed, and it was listed as Jeremiah Skian deceased, meaning that Jeremiah, born in 1833, is supposedly a junior, and his father would have been Jeremiah Senior. So who were his parents? How can we get back further on this line? So Irish genealogical records are pretty sparse in the early 1800s. And so the descendant of Jeremiah, Herman, who is here in the United States, took an ancestry DNA test to try to find out more about his Skian line. And Jeremiah was Herman's first great-grandfather. And so he's going to try to use autosomal DNA to track down Skian matches who are probably related to Jeremiah somehow. So this is Herman's tree, and you can see that Herman is a Skian on his mom's side. So his maternal grandma is Nora Skian, and she came to the U.S., I believe, and her father is the Jeremiah that we're looking at. And she's descended, Nora is a descendant from the second marriage to Honora Maloney. Okay, so the first method that you can use to sorting your DNA matches out is to use a process of elimination. So in this case, Herman knows who his dad's family is. You can see on his tree that his dad's family is named Coates and Meyer. And so any matches that he finds that are coming on his DNA match list from this Coates and Meyer side of the family, he can give a colored dot. And in this case, I just kind of gave it a color, green dot. So all of the matches from dad's side are going to have the green dot. On mom's side, Herman's mom's side, he's got Matthew Ward is his grandfather, and Nora Skian is his grandmother. So again, Matthew Ward is a known entity over here. A lot is known about Matthew Ward's family. His father's James, his mother's Mary Minogue. And so any matches that are on Herman's match page that are from this Ward family can have a yellow dot. Then we get down here to Nora Skian. Her mother is known. You can see Honoria Maloney, her father's Pat, her mother's Catherine Heyer. So any matches that are coming into Herman's match list from this Maloney side could get a blue dot. Through that process of elimination, after you have eliminated all of the dad's side matches with a green dot, all Matthew Ward's side matches with a yellow dot, and all Honoria Maloney's side matches with a blue dot, you should have leftover matches who would be from Jeremiah Skian's side. Does everybody kind of see that? So that's one way of doing your process of elimination, is you just sort through the matches, and you can do this at Ancestry DNA or MyHeritage. They both have the option of doing colored dots. And so those can be really helpful to just sorting out that long list of names on your DNA match page and getting down to the matches that you really need to work with. So once you've gotten your matches limited to just basically Jeremiah's family, then you want to look at the trees of all of those matches, looking for the name Skian, also for any other names that occur repeatedly. Those could be clues to Jeremiah's mother's name, because remember, we don't know his mother at all. And then you can build trees for those matches. And you're looking for people named Skian that would hopefully link to Jeremiah's father and to another unknown family that is probably the mother. Now, a second method that we used with Herman. So the first method wasn't really that successful. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So we used a second method. And the second method is searching your DNA matches. You can see I have the orange arrow over here on the right by the box that says search. When you click on that, it opens up this new search box here. And in the middle box, it says surname and matches trees. So this is where I would put Skian, because Skian is a pretty unusual name. It's not like Smith. So if Herman was looking for an unknown Smith relative, I would not suggest that he does this. But because he's looking for a name like Skian, I think he has a pretty good chance of finding relevant Skians when he uses this search option here. It probably is not going to bring up a lot of extraneous people named Skian. It's probably going to bring up pretty relevant people. Skians, we're hoping for Skians in County Clare in Ireland. And again, we did get a list of people that are on Herman's match list that have the name Skian in their trees. So when you compare and contrast the trees of those matches, can you connect them up to the same Skian family? And you start building trees. And then you look at the shared matches between Herman and the Skian matches, and you get more matches. And you can make a large, if you have good matches with good trees or good enough trees that you can build trees off of their trees, you may be able to link up to a Skian family that might be possibly the right ones that you're looking for. So with that, that is what we did. So it's a little bit hard to see, but basically there's a couple here, a male Skian and Mary O'Day, who had at least 2 children. Pat and Ann are those 2 children. And there's 3 DNA matches, DNA match J, DNA match H, and DNA match B, who are all descended from Ann. And then there's 1 DNA match C that descends from Pat over here on the far left on the tree. I added Jeremiah in with that dotted line. So this is not saying that Jeremiah is the son of male Skian and Mary O'Day. It's saying, I wonder if he is the son of male Skian and Mary O'Day. He could be. That might be a place for him to fit on the tree. So this is a speculative tree at this point, as far as Jeremiah's placement on it goes. But this is what happens when I built trees for the skin matches that we found in Herman's DNA match listed ancestry. And they do all go back to a family of Skians, and they live in County Clare. So it seems likely that this family is somehow related to Jeremiah. Now, the trees of the matches have problems. So if you look back over here, basically the male Skian on the tree has been called Darby, Pat, or Thomas on different trees. So none of these people, DNA match C, J, H, and B, can really agree on what the name of the father of this family is. They agree that the mother's Mary O'Day, but they can't agree on the name of the father. So that's problematic. Are we matching up with, one family, or is this multiple families headed by a Thomas, a Darby, and a Pat? Don't know. So obviously more genealogical research needs to be done and collaborating with the matches to sort this all out. But this is more information than Herman had before. Certainly Jeremiah is the right age to be a sibling to Pat and Anne. Jeremiah's father is supposed to be Jeremiah Sr. That's also another issue. So this is not a slam dunk, but this is, like I said, this is more information than Herman and the family in the US had before. And it gives them a direction to go in, to work with these Skian matches, to collaborate with them, to seek to connect those families in genealogical records. And my other suggestions to Herman were to test at more autosomal testing companies to get more matches. So test at 23andMe, test at MyHeritage, test at Family Tree DNA, and see if you get more matches and if they bring more clarity to the situation. Okay, so that's our first example using autosomal DNA. Now, our second example is going to be from MyHeritage, and we're going to be doing filtering by location. And this is something that you can do at MyHeritage. You can also do it at 23andMe. It's not as easy of a feature to use at 23andMe. MyHeritage really does make it quite easy for you. And this gives you the location of your DNA matches. So for instance, my location on MyHeritage is given as the United States because that is where I am located. But if I had a match who was from Germany, it would say Germany after their name, or whatever country it is that is their location. So this can be an advantage if you are looking for relatives in a particular country. You can use this filter at MyHeritage to kind of winnow into the matches that say that they're from the country that you're interested in. And I should say that MyHeritage is the company that is most used by current European residents. So if your origins are in Europe or partly in Europe, and you are looking to kind of connect up to people that are currently in Europe, testing at MyHeritage might be a really good idea for you. So this is what it looks like to filter your DNA matches by location at MyHeritage. This is me. We're at my DNA match page, and you can see under DNA matches, there are a number of different options across there. One of them is locations. So USA, United Kingdom, these are the top locations that I have DNA matches in. So this is an example for a friend of mine named John. He had this match, and her name's Della, and he can see that she's in Germany. It says from Germany right there where the orange arrow is. It says she's possibly a third cousin, and this is just a guesstimate on the part of the DNA testing company. They don't really know. They're just looking at the amount of DNA that you share. and saying, well, maybe you're a third cousin. We don't, look there as a possibility. So he's sharing 97 centimorgans with Della. Now he's intrigued because he has a number of recent German ancestors. And so he looks at Della's tree, and she had a tree that had 3 people in it. One of them is herself, and the other is her father, which is said Private Bader, and her mother, Private Adelworth. Now, when John saw this, he said, I know who I have Adelworths in my tree. And so here's John's tree. And he said, the Adelworths are over on this line over here where the orange arrow is. Wendell and Noel and his wife, whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce. So Wendelin and wife had a daughter who married a man named Adelworth. And so he was very excited about this. And John had a photo of this family. So this is the woman, Teresa Knoll, who married a Gottfried Adelworth. And John didn't know what had happened to their family beyond this picture. And so Teresa Knoll is a sister to John's great-grandfather, John Meyer, who changed his name from Knoll to Meyer. So basically, this match that John has on MyHeritage has to be from this Knoll and Adelworth marriage. And so this is a new cousin for him. He could contact her. He can reestablish a connection with that German branch of his family that is still in Germany. Similarly, this is a match of mine at MyHeritage. And you can see that we're going to call her Emily, and it says she's from Slovenia. It also says she's a third cousin's daughter, and that is also just an estimation that MyHeritage has given us because we share 49 centimorgans. When we look at Mary's tree or Emily's tree, we can see that she doesn't have it all filled out, but she does have it filled out over here to this couple with the orange arrow, and that's Alex Pishavitz and Maria Leggett. And I recognize those names. Those are my second great-grandparents. And I can also see that this Emily has a lot of photos in her tree. So this is exciting. She might have some family photos that I don't have. So here's my tree, and you can see that the same couple, Anton Pishavitz and Maria Leggett, are in my tree as well. So basically, that DNA match, Emily and myself, are about second cousins to each other, or third cousins. Yeah, we're third cousins to each other. And these are from her tree. Like I said, she had a lot of photos in her tree, and she and I have been in contact and have been sharing information. So she is, again, somebody that I did not know, who's still in Slovenia, who's interested in family history and knows a lot about the family that stayed behind over there. And so now I have connection with her, and I can correspond with her and share information. Okay, now let's move on to our next example, which is when you have a rascal grandfather. So this is about Jane's rascal grandfather. His name was Alexander Craig. And Alexander was born, according to U.S. records, October 9th, 1886. He was married twice, and Jane found this out through genealogical research. It was not known in the family, or if it was very hush-hush. He was married twice, married first in Canada, and the Canadian wife died. And the children that he had with her were raised by her parents. And in Canada, on his marriage record, he said he's from Dundee, Scotland. He married again in the U.S., and when he got married in the U.S., he said he was from Auburn, New York. and all of his census records in the US and his death certificate in the US and so forth, all claim that he was born in Auburn, New York. So basically, he erased the idea that he was actually an immigrant to this country and was trying to portray that he had been born here for whatever reason. And so his family here believed that he was from, Auburn, New York. On both of the marriage records, he gave his parents' names as Alexander Craig and Elizabeth Mackenzie. So those line up, and of course the birth dates line up. So we know that the man in Canada and the man in the US are the same man. Now, different stories that the family had passed down about Alexander were that he was an orphan, or that his wealthy family disowned him for some reason. Obviously not his fault, he was an angel, he was a saint. All of these stories were unproven. And so family members that are living today wanted to look into this more and try to find out what was going on with Alexander. So when they did searching for an Alexander Craig born in Auburn, New York, or having some connection to Auburn, New York, didn't find anything. No parents with those names, nothing like that. And so when they started looking for him in Dundee, Scotland, they did find a family that could have been his family. There was an Alexander Craig Jr. who was living with an Alexander Craig Sr. and a mother named Elizabeth. She had a different last name. She wasn't Mackenzie, she was Nichols. But could this have been his family? So Jane is his granddaughter, and she wants to test this theory and try to figure out, is she on the right track with this family in Dundee, Scotland? This is the family that she found. You can see that they are in Scotland there. And little Alexander, the son, is 5 years old, and Alexander and Elizabeth are in their late 40s. So what we ended up doing in this case, and this was Jane's idea, but it does work. It's a little risky, but you can test a theory using through lines at Ancestry. So you could add a potential ancestor to your tree. There are ways in Ancestry to add in the tree to add a tree tag, which is basically a label that you can add onto your tree that says hypothesis. And so you could label this potential ancestor a hypothesis, meaning you're just testing it out. It's not the gospel truth. And you want to make sure your tree is linked to your DNA kit when you do this. Then you want to wait at least 24 hours, and then you want to check through lines. If you don't know what through lines are, you can read in the handout about it, and also read on the help menu at Ancestry to get an idea of what through lines is. Through lines, though, collects your DNA matches and tries to match them to your tree. So if you've added this potential ancestor to your tree, through lines is going to find DNA matches to that potential ancestor if you have any. So if through lines does show up that you have matches to that family, then you have tentatively identified that this is that you're on the right track, that you are in the right family. You want to keep researching further in genealogical records to find the actual connection. If not, if you don't get through lines to that particular potential ancestor, then you want to delete it out of your tree because you may be barking up the wrong tree. Ha ha ha. And reevaluate your situation there. So with this, Jane added Alexander Craig and Elizabeth Nichol as the parents of her Alexander Craig. So she basically made a hypothesis that his parents were Alexander Craig and Elizabeth Nichol. the people that she found in the Scottish census and on Scottish family trees on Ancestry. She added Alexander, her grandfather, in as their son. And when she did that, this is what happened with her through lines. It popped up and said, oh yeah, you have a match to this person here. And she's descended from Marjorie, the daughter of Alexander and Elizabeth. And you also have a match over here with CW, who is descended from Alexander and Elizabeth's daughter, Isabella. And over here, he has a match, or Jane has a match to MS, who is the granddaughter of John Craig, which is also another son of Alexander and Elizabeth. So this is telling us that Jane is on the right track, that she somehow is related to this Alexander Craig and Elizabeth Nicol over in Scotland. We don't know if the relationship that we have is quite right, but we know that they are somehow related, or she wouldn't be matching with descendants of their other children. So Jane ended up contacting some of those matches and talking to them. And what she found out was that there was a little different story than what Alexander was saying when he got to the US. He actually was the grandson of Alexander Sr. and Elizabeth, and not their son. He was born 1 year earlier than what he said, and his mother was Isabella, their daughter. She was unmarried at the time of his birth, and she did go on and get married to someone else a few years later and have 10 other children. Alexander, who moved to the US, was probably raised by those grandparents, and maybe he didn't know that they were not his biological parents. We're not quite certain of that fact. But she did find his birth record over in Dundee, and you can see it says that his mother is Isabella Craig, and I believe it also says somewhere on there that he is illegitimate, which would be the terminology that they would have used. So through lines led Jane to the correct family in Scotland, but it did not point us to the correct relationship of Alexander to this family. So Jane had to verify that relationship through doing more genealogical research and contacting her matches and finding that birth record that showed clearly that Alexander's mother was Isabella. So she has revised her tree to indicate the correct relationships. And she's actually met up online virtually with some cousins in Scotland, and she will be visiting Scotland to meet them in person this fall. All right. So finally, we're going to talk about Y-DNA for a minute. And I have more information about this in your handout if you're not familiar with Y-DNA. But basically, the Y-DNA test, again, is looking only at the male line. So only a man can take a Y-DNA test, and it's going to look at his father's line. So if you have a question about a male's paternal line, this might be a good test for you. You can get it from the Family Tree DNA testing company. So this is from my own family, and so this is my problem ancestor. His name was John Mitchell. He was born around 1780 in North Carolina. He married Frances Busby in 1808 in Sumner County, Tennessee. He died in 1863 in Sumner County. No records were found that named his parents or where he came from in North Carolina. This is research that my mother and I did over a number of years. I would say at least 20 years we spent on this. We researched his life from the time of his marriage to his death in Sumner County. And I can pretty safely say that we looked at all the major relevant records in Sumner County. We didn't do what Elizabeth Shown Mills would say to do, which is look at every record book in the entire courthouse for his name. Page by page, but we did look at a great many of them. We did not find him to be connected to any other people with the surname of Mitchell in Sumner County. There were other Mitchells there. They turned out to be unrelated as far as we could tell. And we did a reasonably exhaustive research that was done both online and in person in all the applicable record groups and repositories. I feel pretty sure that we did that. We did have a theory, however, that was kind of wildly speculative. At least I thought it was, but it was my mom's theory. And we had to come up with a way that we could test this theory. So the theory went something like this. John Mitchell, as you remember, was married to Fanny Busby, and she was identified. So her parents were known, and the place that her family was from was known. They were from Granville County, North Carolina. John and Fanny named a son Major W. Mitchell. There was a Major Mitchell in Granville County, North Carolina, who was married to a Molly Wiggins. He died in 1803. And several of Fanny's Busby relatives bought items at his estate sale, meaning that the two families would have lived close by each other and been acquainted with one another. No other genealogical records were found that tied our family to this Mitchell family, even after we did extensive searching in Granville County records, which took us another 5 years of looking at many, many Granville County records, trying to connect our John and Fanny to this Major. So we really couldn't figure out whether this was his father or not. My mother was very much convinced that this was who our John Mitchell's father was. And I wasn't sure, but we wondered whether DNA could help us. And so autosomal DNA, which we've been talking about tonight, John was my 4th great-grandfather. So technically, I should have DNA from him. My mom should have DNA from him. He's her 3rd great-grandfather. It might lead us to Mitchell matches and solve this problem. There's also the Y chromosome test, but I would need to find a male in my family who had inherited John's Y chromosome. And the mitochondrial DNA is not going to be applicable because that's a female line test. With the autosomal DNA, if I wanted to go that route, I would want to test the older generation first, which would be my mom, and use her DNA rather than mine. With the Y DNA, I have to, like I said, I have to find a male, and I have 6 uncles who all have John's Y DNA, so they could be potential testers. So this is the way it looks in my family. You can see there's me, my mom. So this is her father. So this is my mom's maiden name is Mitchell. So I have, like I said, my mom had 6 brothers. And so any one of them would have inherited the same Y chromosome from their father, Robert, who inherited it from his father, John, who inherited it from his father, John, who inherited it from James, and then back to the John that married Fanny. So this is our earliest guy up here in the red box. So we actually got my uncle Gordon to take the test, the Y chromosome test, in 2001. And this is long before autosomal DNA was a thing. So basically, this was the kind of DNA testing that was being done in 2001. Now, the best case scenario would have been if we could have found somebody that was a male line descendant of that Major Mitchell from Granville County, North Carolina. And my mom did a lot of letter writing, because that's what you did in 2001, and phone calling of people in Granville County, North Carolina, trying to find somebody who was a male line descendant of that Major Mitchell and ask them to do a DNA test for her. And she was able to find a couple females who were descended from that Major, but they either didn't have a brother, or their brother didn't want to do a test, or something of that nature. So we were not able to find anyone to directly compare against. But so the next best thing is to look at what kind of Y-DNA matches do we have. So we're looking at my Uncle Gordon's Y-DNA test, and we're seeing, does he have matches? Who are they? And what Mitchell family do they come from? So this is what it looks like when you get back your Y chromosome test results. And we don't have a lot of time to go over this, but basically, this is at 67 markers. So it's looking at 67 different spots on the Y chromosome. And it's saying that my uncle has, if you see up at the top of your screen here, the top left, my uncle has 41 matches with different men at the 67 marker level. And the names would be under this box here. I removed the names of the matches for privacy. I can't show those. Over here on this column in the middle, earliest known ancestor. This is basically telling us their earliest known male line paternal ancestor. And so these men have put in who their earliest known ancestor is. Most of them are Mitchells. Some of them are not. We're not going to worry about the people that are not Mitchells at this point. Of the 41 matches that my uncle has at the 67 marker level test, I believe, 3/4 of them are Mitchells, and the rest of them are either mostly can point to a non-paternal event in their family where there was an adoption or an affair or something like that, and they really should be a Mitchell. And looking at the earliest known ancestors, and we also can see some of the matches trees. There's a place to find the matches trees on here. I'm not showing you that right now, but they can load their tree. And so I can look and see who these men are and what Mitchells they are descending from. So basically, these are called STR. This is called an STR test. And so STR test is testing 37, 67, 111 markers. And these are relevant to your genealogical research. They are not the highest level testing that's available. That's big Y. But for this webinar tonight, we're going to be talking about the STR matches. You can still find out a lot from the STR matches. So you're looking for matches of your expected surname and work with those matches. So like I said, my uncle has a lot of Mitchell matches, so those are the ones we want to work with. If you do not have matches to your expected surname, do not panic or jump to conclusions, but do consult an expert for advice. And then big Y testing is the advanced Y chromosome testing that they're doing now. It's a more recent development, and we're not going to really cover it in this session too much. So he had 41 matches at 67 markers. And what you want to do is try to identify the common paternal ancestor of the matches. And how are you going to do that? Well, you're going to do it by communicating with the matches, viewing their trees, and building trees for them. So a lot of these men had a sketchy tree that I could take and I could start building it and adding generations to the tree. And once I figured out who the immigrant ancestor was, or the earliest known ancestor of this entire group of matches, the 41 people at 67 markers, I can then build a descendant tree, putting the matches on the tree. So this is a huge tree. I can't put it on a slide, so I didn't. But basically what I came up with was 2 immigrant ancestors. So most of the matches that my uncle has can trace back to a Henry Mitchell from early colonial Virginia. And then about 3 of them can connect to a Matthew Mitchell of early Massachusetts. This is very unique situation. Usually it traces back to 1 immigrant ancestor, not 2. But basically, then you can start tracing Henry Mitchell from early Virginia forward in time and Matthew Mitchell of early Massachusetts forward in time. and tried to place my uncle's 41 matches on a big descendant tree of those two men. We also want to try to put our John Mitchell, remember, we're still looking at John Mitchell of Sumner County, on that tree, and Major Mitchell of Granville County, North Carolina, on that tree. Can we prove that those two men are descended from either Henry Mitchell of early colonial Virginia or Matthew of early Massachusetts? So when I started doing research on those two immigrant men, remember, these are the immigrant ancestors that all of my uncle's matches basically go back to. Henry came to colonial Virginia around 1650, 1660. He was possibly born in Scotland, according to unsourced online trees, which, as we know, are usually not correct. The majority of the matches appear to descend from him. And Major Mitchell, importantly, Major Mitchell from Granville County, North Carolina, is a descendant of this Henry Mitchell. Therefore, our theory, remember Mom and my theory, that our John Mitchell from Sumner County was the son of Major Mitchell of Granville County, is still, that theory is still in the running, because we can prove that our DNA does match with the paternal line of Major Mitchell. Major Mitchell's from this Henry, and so are we. And we had that other indirect evidence where, you know, the Busbys knew this Major Mitchell and his relatives, and they lived near each other in Granville County. So all that information, all that data that we have that kind of suggested that Major Mitchell's probably our John's father, we're feeling stronger and stronger about it. We could probably write up a genealogical proof argument to say that is who the father is. We still don't have a lot of direct evidence, but we have a lot of good supporting indirect evidence. Now, Matthew Mitchell, here's where the part about the immigrant origins comes in. So Matthew Mitchell, remember, about 3 of my uncle's DNA matches, the Y chromosome matches, descend from this Matthew Mitchell. Matthew Mitchell is a known quantity. He came to Massachusetts in 1635. So he is an early settler of New England. And so he is covered in a lot of the Great Migration books that Robert Charles Anderson did. And he is tracked back to a particular place in England. So he's born 1590 in Halifax, Yorkshire, England. And a lot has been written about him in literature. A lot of good peer review articles have been written about him, and a lot is known about him. And so basically, for his descendants to be matching those of Henry Mitchell of Virginia means that they have a common paternal ancestor back in England or Scotland. And since we know that Matthew Mitchell is in Halifax, Yorkshire, we can postulate that Henry Mitchell is from that area also. The Henry Mitchell who came to Virginia, who is the forefather of my Major Mitchell in Granville County and my John Mitchell in Sumner County. He is probably from Halifax, Yorkshire also. Now, this is, you know, not a slam dunk, but it is more information than we had before. We didn't know anything about that Henry Mitchell other than he turned up in colonial Virginia quite early. And supposedly he's from Scotland. But now we know that he's somehow related to Matthew Mitchell, who has a known paternity in Halifax, Yorkshire, England. So we have a specific place in England that we can begin looking for our Mitchell family. And according to the big Y testing, which I said we weren't going to talk about, but the big Y testing is giving you a time frame now. And so a descendant of Henry and a descendant of Matthew both did the big Y. And the time frame that the big Y has suggested is that they would share a common paternal ancestor around 1500. Now, in England, around 1500, they were recording births and marriages and deaths. They were not recording them in every parish, and not all those records have survived to today. But there is a possibility that we could find genealogical records that tie together those two families. And so this is what the tree kind of looks like. So the big Y is saying that Matthew Mitchell, born 1590 in Halifax, Yorkshire, and Henry Mitchell, born about 1634, possibly in Yorkshire also, had a common Mitchell paternal ancestor around 1500. And then just doing a little math, there's probably 5 or 6 generations between Henry and this common paternal ancestor. And there's about probably maybe 2 or 3 unknown males in between Matthew and the common paternal ancestor. But this is a lot more than we knew before. So we're really happy with this to actually have a place in England to start looking for our Henry and his family and to know about this connection to an early colonial New England Mitchell. So in conclusion, these are some methods that you can use to take your DNA matches and to get yourself back into the old country a little better. And again, I wanted to reiterate that once you do find some family in the old country, be sure you contact them. Try to get a hold of them to share information and photographs and documents and stories. And you might even, invite them to come and see you, or you could possibly go over there and meet them at some point and use their tree and their genealogical information to move your research farther back in time. And have fun with it.